Now consider, said Socrates, what their release and healing from bonds and folly would be like if something of this sort were by nature to happen to them. Take a man who is released and suddenly compelled to stand up, to turn his neck around, to walk and look up toward the light, and who, moreover, in doing all this is in pain, and because he is dazzled, unable to make out those things whose shadows he saw before. Now, I'm going to pause to note here that there's really no specifics about, well, how does somebody get liberated here? It's represented as a kind of act of divine intervention, and I'm going to come back to that. But it's also represented as by nature. That is, we've been talking about people who are born with a proclivity to philosophy. Some folks, who knows why, right, just have a more searching curiosity, and they are set free from their chains by perhaps some unseen God. Okay, so we'll get back to that. But in his pain, and because he is dazzled, he is unable to make out those things whose shadows he saw before. What do you suppose he'd say if someone were to tell him that before he saw silly nothings, while now he is somewhat nearer to what is and more turned toward beings, and so he sees more correctly? And in particular, showing him each of the things that pass by, someone were to compel the man to answer his questions about what they are. Don't you suppose he'd be at a loss and believe that what was seen before is truer than what is now shown? So he is describing the disorientation that comes along, if you will, with being red-pilled. And let me say that, red pill has become the kind of possession of a certain political subfaction, right? Some people, some genuinely bad guys have used it, some like neo-Nazis have used it, but it's also in much wider currency, right, among people who are kind of either libertarian or just politically homeless, and began to realize that something was terribly wrong with the structure of their society. They were being repeatedly lied to about, take your pick, about COVID, about war, about whatever. This used to be the province of the New Left, right, during the Vietnam War. This idea that wake up, man, tune in, drop out, wake up. This sort of idea that there was somebody out there who could give you a key to understanding things that you had only thought you understood. That's the red pill metaphor. That's why people are starting to use all these metaphors, like getting woke, right? I mean, I obviously don't think that wokeness is the right way of understanding our politics. I think it's pernicious and a kind of blindness. But people nevertheless represent it as the experience of having been woken up, right? We thought that everything was one way, and now it turns out everything is another way. And the red pill is sort of the conservative flavor version of that. Both groups, though, are recognizing that the kind of standard line, the current thing, whatever you want to call it, is deeply distorted, that there's something terribly wrong with our media, who, of course, are, another group of people who, manipulate the shadows, right? And there's something terribly wrong with our politicians. And this is why the popularity of Trump, right, is accompanied also by the popularity of Bernie, because both guys are proposing, right, that you've been had and they're going to let you in on the club, right? Now, of course, that offer can come from good people and it can come from bad people. But there's no getting around the fact, if you're going to take Plato seriously, right, that we do need an awakening, right? That in order to kind of start even down the path to truth, you have to understand that most people aren't in it for you and aren't in it for truth. They're in it for themselves. And so this is, again, a very famous image and sort of understood in this heady philosophical way, but actually quite practical as a description of the situation we find ourselves in today.